There is a great beauty in everyday small things. Perhaps many of us have experienced our day becoming better or our feelings uplifted through something small and through something simple. A chat with a friend, a really good cup of coffee or tea, a good night's sleep, just getting up and moving around, a glass of water, helping others, a meal, a good meal with a friend, petting our dog or our cat, trying out something new, something we haven't done before, driving a different route or trying a different restaurant, savoring some small accomplishment, just breathing in fresh air, a few minutes looking up at the clouds at the sky or the stars at night, good music, a child's smile, maybe something as small and simple as clean sheets just out of the dryer. The spiritual practice of mindfulness reminds us to be present in these things, to experience them fully, to take the time to savor them. The Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us of this when he says, "We can smile, breathe, walk, and eat our meals in a way that allows us to be in touch with the abundance of happiness that is available to us." And he goes on to say, we're very good at preparing to live, but not very good at living. We know how to sacrifice 10 years for a diploma, and we're willing to work very hard to get a job or a car, a house, and so on. But, he says, we have difficulty remembering that we are alive in the present moment, the only moment there is for us to be alive. Every breath we take, every step we make can be filled with peace, joy, and serenity. We only need to be awake and alive in the present moment. Small is beautiful. Small is powerful. And yet, sometimes we lose sight of that when it comes to small organizations, small groups of people, or small congregations. We sometimes get caught up in that bigger is better mentality. When an action or an activity or a gathering is small, we can sometimes find ourselves feeling disappointed or devaluing its importance. Instead of savoring the moment and the relationships, we may find ourselves planning for how to make it bigger and better next time and miss that opportunity to savor what is and to find the beauty and the power in the small. Small is beautiful and small is powerful. 25 years of my professional life has been spent in the museum community, and in that time I learned the value and importance of small museums. Did you know that there are over 1,500 museums in the state of Illinois alone? And the majority of those are small museums. Small history museums, small cultural centers, little historic houses, nature centers, small galleries and art museums, little small science museums, and children's museums. The children's museum I started at was in the basement of a Park District building. And this is also true nationwide, that while we often think of those large and well-known museums and institutions, the majority of museums nationwide really are small museums. The A majority of our cultural and historical artifacts, heritage, and stories are all cared for in these small museums. Small museums do have a unique importance and value all their own. And I believe that that same thing is true of our congregations as well. That according to the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, 2/3 of all UU congregations are small congregations. That means the majority of what is the best of UU values, the best of what we're capable of as a faith community, the best of our justice work, the best of being cared for and cultivated, with us all being cared for and cultivated within small churches and within small congregations all around the country and even around the world. So I invite us to be present with one another and savor who we are. Savor the community of communities we are a part of, large and small. And savoring our community and savoring the present moment doesn't mean that we don't change or we don't create new possibilities in our world. We can be present and savor our deepening connections with our relationships to the world, to each other, to a growing sense of awe and beauty and mystery and miracle, to a greater sense of equity and of justice. We can be present, savor the present moment, and find hope and joy in practices of invitation and welcoming, of radical hospitality, and creating spaces of shared belonging with others. We can savor the present moment and nurture our emotional and spiritual growth and well-being in ourselves and in each other. We can savor the small and the beautiful and create new possibilities in the world. In fact, it actually may be the place where change starts and where change happens. The activist and author Adrienne Maree Brown proposes this approach to social justice activism that she calls emergent strategy. And it's a strategy of building change in the world through just relatively small interactions. In her book, Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Shaping Worlds, Adrienne Maree Brown describes some core guiding principles, considerations, and viewpoints for shaping change, lessons from her engagement in social justice movements. These lessons and considerations are: small is good. In fact, she says small is all, that the large is a reflection of the small. That change is constant, it just flows like water. There is always enough time for the right work. There is a conversation in the room that only these people at this moment can have. And it's up to us to find it. Never a failure, always a lesson. Trust the people. If you trust the people, they become trustworthy. And move at the speed of trust. Focus on critical connections more than critical mass. Build the resilience by building relationships. Less prep and more presence. And what you pay attention to grows. But I really want to just focus on that first lesson, what she begins her book with and begins her stories with, the idea that small is good, that small is not a failure, small is not less than, small is good. And these days when the problems that we see in the world around us can seem so large and can seem so pervasive, it can be so easy to devalue small connections. In these past years, we've just seen an unimaginable loss of life globally, nationally, and locally in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, in our congregations. And we continue to feel those wounds, particularly in communities impacted the most, within Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, the poor, the unhoused, the imprisoned, people with disabilities, our elders. And we're still trying to make sense and meaning of all of it, the impact of this pandemic, as well as the injustices laid bare in its wake. We, in our lives, in our communities, and in our congregation, have been living in the midst of a global health crisis, and also in the midst of ongoing racial and climate crisis, and in the midst of our own personal lives, which often include forms of tragedy or forms of trauma that we face and have faced on a daily basis, collectively and personally. We just hold so much. We hold so much in our hearts, and we hold so much in our bodies that we can sometimes forget that we're also loved. We are loved and nurtured, and just as we are loving and nurturing, we are loved and nurtured, and we are loving and nurturing. And so it makes sense. It makes sense that many of us feel exhaustion, weariness, sadness, and perhaps feeling angry or worried for all the work that still needs to be done to make justice and love real, and all the work that needs to be done to make our congregations thrive. And at this moment in time, there's this tremendous pressure within dominant cultures to return to what some refer to as normal, a reassertion of this dehumanizing grind culture that we can find ourselves caught into. And so we ourselves, we might be feeling that pressure. We might be feeling that pressure to surge ahead, to charge ahead. And perhaps we remember things we used to do in our lives and our congregations, and we long for those things so badly. We so badly want to pick up where it feels like we left off, that sometimes we can easily forget to pay attention to the present moment, to where we are now at this moment, to be present and to value presence, taking time in our relationships, to focus on critical relationships more than critical mass. The presence and critical relationships with one person, one child, one family. Being present with a small group, being present with the few people who showed up. In the short time that we've gotten to know each other, you've heard me say, and you'll hear me say again, that we are a community of ministry. That ministry is how we tend to each other and to our collective selves, how we tend to each other in community. One of my favorite quotes about church comes from the Unitarian Universalist minister and theologian James Luther Adams, who said, "Church is where we get to practice being human." Church is where we get to practice being human. And that often takes place in small moments, in small interactions, in small gatherings. So let's hold that sacred knowledge close to our hearts and close to our conscience. That as the activist and community organizer Adrienne Maree Brown reminds us, and that I've said multiple times throughout this message that small is good, that the large is a reflection of the small. We can't practice love and justice on a large scale if we don't take the time to practice it on a small scale. We can't practice democracy on a large scale if we don't take the time to practice it on a small scale. The large is a reflection of the small. Or as it was once written within biblical text, faith as small as a mustard seed can move mountains. Yes, we must and should participate in large-scale movements and actions like the Poor People's Campaign or Side with Love or other actions and movements on behalf of human rights and justice and equity. We must find ways, large and small, individually and together, to resist racial injustice, to resist the resurgence of white supremacy and autocracy, to resist the rollback of human rights impacting women, immigrants, the LGBTQ community, our trans youth, and all of our loved ones. But let us also honor and value the importance of whenever 2 or 3 are gathered, to borrow another biblical phrase. Let us also today and in the days ahead take time to pause and to notice joyful connections. Let us resist the temptation to ignore the messages our bodies give us and instead remember the sacredness of each and all of our bodies in all their diversity and in the many forms that they may take. Let us resist the dominant messages of toxic individualism, and let us remember the beauty and the promise of a shared ministry, a ministry that emerges together. And let us honor and nurture our community of ministry into being. Let us remember to move slowly, to be gentle with ourselves, to be gentle with each other, and to be gentle with those around us. And let us remember that small is good. That scaling up doesn't always mean getting larger in size. It can also mean going deeper with deeper connections, deeper relationships, transforming through collaboration with others, other people, and other communities. So today and this week, let us find joy and savor small things and simple moments. Let them remind you and remind all of us that small is good, that small is beautiful, and that small is powerful. Today and in this week, let us find joy in and savor being part of this small community and congregation. And know that we are good, that we are beautiful, and that we are powerful. Let me end with saying that just one more time, that small is good, small is beautiful, small is powerful, and we are good, we are beautiful, and we are powerful. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.